Thank you, Jeff. Good evening. I'm Katie Vanchiere, and I am the team leader for the Malaria Block team this semester. Over the past 14 weeks, I have had the privilege of working with 4 of the most intelligent and hardworking students at this university. And we are excited to share with you all tonight our recommendations for the malaria transmission blocking vaccine that's being produced in the OU Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. On behalf of the team, I'd like to give a very special thank you to the CCEW staff, Jeff, Sue, Renee, Alyssa, Ryan, and our own fellow Susan. Thank you so much for the opportunity to work on this incredible technology and for the endless support and encouragement throughout the semester. Our CCEW experience would not have been the same without the energy and time that you all pour into this program every day. Throughout the semester, Team Malaria Block has spent long hours learning about malaria transmission, the drug development process, and global health infrastructure. We've talked to countless professionals in the fields of global health and vaccine development, and we've come a very long way from the days of researching and discussing the vaccination of livestock in malaria endemic areas. It is my privilege and honor to introduce to you this evening not only my team, but 4 of my closest friends, Cici, Nikita, Asheema, and Cooper, Team Malaria Block.
Every year, 500,000 children die from malaria. This means that every single minute, a family is devastated by a disease that's actually preventable. One solution exists within the OU Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry in the form of a malaria transmission blocking vaccine, or TBV. In preliminary analysis, this TBV has stopped the transmission of malaria 100% of the time. With that kind of efficacy, it could be the solution to a global problem. This semester, Team Malaria Block has researched the best pathway to patient for this vaccine. We've projected a feasible vaccine approval process, a rollout plan that will distribute over 900 million doses in the first 6 years, and because of this, an economic impact of nearly $10 billion of additional GDP generated across 15 countries. The malaria transmission blocking vaccine is very promising, and with the right strategy, it can be widely distributed and be the solution to malaria that millions of people worldwide have been waiting for. Good evening. I'm Cici Zhou, a chemistry and biochemistry major from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I'm Nikita Hussain, an economics sophomore from Edmond, Oklahoma.
I'm Asheema Pruthi, an economics junior from Edmond, Oklahoma.
And I'm Cooper Lund, an economics junior from Kansas City, Kansas.
Our team leader is Katie Vanchiere. Our mentor is Dr. Lee from the OU Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry. Our advisor is Andrew Pollack from the Office of Technology. And our mentors are Tom Apel and John Gatto. In recent years, international organizations have come together in an effort to eradicate malaria, but malaria is still prevalent. In 2013, over $2.5 billion were poured into the procurement and distribution of bed nets, insecticides, and anti-malarial drugs. However, there are still 200 million cases of malaria every year, and half of the world's population is at risk for contracting this disease. In addition, malaria disproportionately affects children. Not only do 80% of deaths occur in children, but it's been estimated that in Africa alone, 10 million school days are missed every year because of malaria. Malaria is a significant burden on endemic countries, even despite the billions of dollars poured into it every year. There are existing solutions to malaria, but these have 3 key limitations, and these are limitations that the malaria TBV directly addresses. Current solutions kill either the mosquito or the malaria parasite. This causes resistance to develop, and that decreases the efficacy of future treatments. However, the malaria TBV does not kill the mosquito or the parasite. It simply stops the transmission of malaria. Because of this, there's no cause for resistance to develop. Existing solutions often need to be used daily, and this puts people at risk when they forget to use a bed net at night or temporarily run short of anti-malarial drugs. However, after an initial 3 doses in the first year, the malaria TBV only needs to be used once per year for full coverage. And finally, One single mosquito can transmit malaria to multiple people in its lifetime. Other solutions don't address the high transmission rate of malaria. But the malaria TBV has shown in preliminary animal studies that it can stop the transmission of malaria every time it's used. The malaria transmission blocking vaccine is convenient and effective. And now I'm going to pass it on to Nikita, who's going to talk about how exactly it works.
Thank you, Cici. So now that Cici has just described some of the issues that existing malaria prevention methods face, I want to talk about how Dr. Lee's technology will work and in which countries it can be implemented to make a difference. First, Dr. Lee's vaccine method is novel, effective, and under a provisional patent. To understand how the TBV will interrupt the transmission cycle, let's take a look at how malaria is transmitted. Malaria is caused by a parasite, and this parasite is passed from human to human through a mosquito. When a mosquito bites a human who suffers from malaria, it will ingest this parasite, and then it will pass on this parasite to another person that it will go on to bite during its lifetime. The way that Dr. Lee's vaccine will work is that when a mosquito bites a human who has been immunized with the TBV, it will ingest antibodies that will prevent the parasite from being passed on to another human. In this way, a person who is immunized with the TBV can prevent the people around them from contracting a case of malaria. Ideally, to completely eliminate malaria, the vaccine will need to be administered to an entire population. However, we have found the vaccine is still effective at any level of vaccination coverage. The TBV also offers 3 key advantages in usage, cost, and efficacy, which will allow it to work in conjunction with existing methods such as bed nets and antimalarials, and even replace the need of indoor residual sprays. The TBV can work alongside bed nets to increase its efficacy to reduce the amount of malaria cases. With the TBV working alongside bed nets to reduce cases, it can also reduce the reliance of antimalarials, which are required more often at a higher cost to successfully prevent malaria. Finally, the TBV can be a safer alternative to transmission blockage to replace the need of indoor residual sprays, which are required more often at a higher cost with only moderate rates of efficacy. Despite some inconveniences in these 3 methods, they have still been distributed at a large scale. And because the TBV offers a complementary value to these existing methods, it is possible to distribute it at a similar scale. To begin distribution of this TBV, we have identified Ghana as the best country for introduction of the vaccine. We identified out of 97 countries with ongoing malaria transmission based on these 3 key metrics. Malaria cases affect 27% of the entire population, which is a higher than average rate compared to other countries that suffer from malaria. Finally, we have found that the country has been financially and operationally supported in national malaria control programs and vaccination campaigns by major organizations. In 2013, over $300 million was spent by key organizations such as the President's Malaria Initiative, the Gavi Alliance, and the Global Fund. This represents only a handful of the organizations that are available to bring this TBV to the people of this country. Finally, we have found that without government support, established distribution pathways could not be successful. In 2012, the government of Ghana worked alongside these international organizations to introduce not 1, but 2 vaccines in the same year. It is these types of successes that have allowed Ghana to become a leader in vaccination efforts, which will make it qualified to introduce this new technology. Once the TBV is successfully introduced into Ghana, we have developed a plan to introduce the vaccine over 5 years into 15 countries. We use criteria for a vaccine introduction plan for a meningitis vaccine exclusively used for the distribution in Africa. We determined, using these criteria, that the vaccine should be introduced into 3 countries each year after the first year of introduction in Ghana. After 6 years, the vaccine will be introduced into 15 total countries with over 900 million doses distributed through the distribution pathways that Asheema will talk about. And with that, I will turn it over to Asheema, who will talk about the distribution process and the financial projections that can bring this TBV from the lab to the people in these countries who desperately need it.
Thank you, Nikita. Now that Nikita has shown us about the distribution pathways that there are, it's important to understand how crucial partnerships will be in this process. To begin with, the vaccine is currently here at the university. The next steps would be to find a licensee. Both Pfizer and GSK and Sanofi both invest millions of dollars in anti-malarial efforts, as well as in university research, and have a heavy presence in Africa. Ideally, these 3 licensees would be best fit. The next step would be distributors. Distributors can be categorized as government, international aid, and nonprofit organizations. All of these distributors collaborate heavily in anti-malarial efforts every single year. Finally, financiers will play a key role. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the Global Fund, invest millions of dollars in anti-malarial efforts. They will play a key role in distributing this vaccine from the distributors to the patients. There are also important pathways to look into. Hep B3 co-administration is an ideal pathway, as Hep B3 is a drug that is administered 3 times every year, similar to the malaria TBV vaccine in the first year. Next, school immunizations are another ideal pathway, as school immunizations are easy to keep track of over time and easy to quantify. National Vaccination Week and other clinics are other great methods to get this vaccine to the patients that need it. However, the numbers that we have projected today only factor in the Hep B3 co-administrations as well as school distributions, as these are the best numbers and easiest to quantify currently. Through these methods, we would be able to distribute the TBV to the patients that need it. But to get to that step, it's important to understand that there's a necessary FDA pathway to move through before you can get to distribution and manufacturing. Like mentioned earlier, the vaccine is currently here at the university in research and development. The next steps would be to file for international patents. Ideally, this is where the licensee would come in to cover the cost of filing for patents in the endemic countries, like Ghana, for example. The next steps would be clinical trials. Phase 1, 2, and 3 test the safety and efficacy of this drug in small and large population sizes over different durations of time. Once trials have been completed, we will be able to submit this data for review and approval and have a TBV that's able to be distributed and manufactured. As you can tell, this is a very time-consuming and costly process, equating over $600 million in almost 15 years. However, this vaccine will be profitable in the long run. With the projected price of approximately $2 based on vaccines that are currently on the market and other social impact drugs that NGOs are able to purchase, and a cost of production at $1 per vaccine, there would be a profit of $1 per dose. With the 2 distribution pathways made note earlier, the Hep B3 co-administrations and school immunizations, we would be able to distribute 18 million doses in Ghana in the first year, followed by 60 million in the second year, and so forth. So through this vaccine would break even. The original investment of $600 million would break even by year 6 alone. In this process, there are also key stakeholders that will come into play. OU, a key stakeholder in this process, would receive about 4% of the financial return, and by the 6th year alone would receive over $30 million. So as you can see, this is a great financial investment for OU and any licensee. Now I'll pass it off to Cooper, who will talk more about the social impact and economic impact that this drug can have as well.
Thank you, Asheema. So we've just spent a little bit of time talking specifically about why licensees would be interested in licensing out this drug. But what I'm going to talk about now is why specifically Dr. Lee has invested the last 6 years of his life in this transmission blocking vaccine, and why we've invested the last semester in it. And that's because of the difference that it really can make. So here I've got an outline of, at break even, the successes that will have been achieved by this transmission blocking vaccine. Initially we have Ghana because that's where we'll begin with the vaccine and where the highest level of coverage will be able to be attained. So in 6 years, over 16 million people in Ghana will have been vaccinated. Over 17 million cases will have been prevented, which will include over 46,000 deaths prevented and 37,000 deaths in children prevented. To put that in context, in just Ghana and in just 6 years, the TBV will be able to prevent the deaths of 5 times the number of children enrolled in the Norman public school system just this year, just in Ghana and just in 6 years. Additionally, they'll be able to generate an additional $2 billion in GDP over those 6 years. Now, in all 15 countries as a whole, over 200 million people will be vaccinated, preventing over 90 million cases, over 270,000 deaths, and over 200,000 deaths in children, with an additional amount of GDP generated of over $9 billion. And again, that's just through the Hep B co-administration that we've discussed, as well as the school immunizations. It doesn't take into account health clinics or National Vaccination Week. Now, for these great social and economic impacts to actually be realized, there are some specific next steps that need to be taken by both Dr. Lee and the Office of Technology Development to get this vaccine at a place where it's ready to be licensed out to an actual licensee. The first have to do with Dr. Lee. Currently, Dr. Lee has established research that is sufficient for publishing academic data. But what he's going to need to do to get the data to a point where it can actually be used in the process of licensing out the TBV will be additional research into a number of different things, including the consistency of the drug, the number of antibodies that can be produced in different dosages, as well as the way that the antibodies are produced in different animals other than just the mouse model that he has tried thus far. Additionally, the Office of Technology Development currently has a provisional patent on this TBV. Now, that will need to be extended using the Patent Cooperation Treaty to last for an additional 30 months. Over those 30 months, the Office of Technology Development will have the opportunity to actually look specifically at what countries this TBV needs to be patented in, so the technology can specifically be protected in regions where it might be stolen. Additionally, they'll begin speaking to licensees that we have outlined for them thus far about the potential of licensing out the TBV, and ultimately will make that decision to license out the TBV so that it can go or start making its way through the FDA pathway and ultimately make a difference in lives of millions of people everywhere. So, as we've shown, malaria is a massive problem across the world, but the malaria TBV offers another step in solving that problem. We'll begin by rolling out in 15 countries, and though it will be expensive, it's possible to break even in just 6 years and save the lives of over 200,000 children. Now, we've enjoyed what we've done quite a bit this semester. We've gotten to know each other well, and we've developed very, very strong friendships. But the thing that's been the coolest and most important for us is that we've gotten to spend this last semester working on something that we genuinely believe can make a difference. And that's been really exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Thanks for listening to us.
What is going to keep other people from copying the drug as soon as it becomes approved for testing?
Sure. So once it's converted into the long-term patent, the actual method by which transmission is blocked will be what is specifically patented, and so because of that, it will be protected for the extent of the patent.
So in our research, we found that a lot of organizations like the WHO and other other distributors are interested in a TBV, as a lot of people realize that this is the next step to actually eradicate malaria. Currently, there's a lot of different things on the market, like mentioned earlier, anti-malarial meds, bed nets, but those haven't worked efficiently over time. So people believe that this is truly the next step to actually eradicate malaria. So with that, there are different TBVs in research, and people believe that this will be next, so pharmaceuticals included. We have not contacted any pharmaceuticals, no.
Are any of the pharmaceutical companies you're looking at, do they require FDA approval to distribute this drug in Africa?
Right, so a lot of the process that they go through is the FDA process. What we found that was actually pretty interesting was they a lot of times do clinical trials, so phase 1, 2, and 3 in India, and they outsource those. So there are parts of the process that they outsource for cost benefits, but for the most part, they do follow the FDA process.
Okay, so there's no time saving if you want to go back and the FDA process for this.
Right, so the major companies go through the FDA process.
You mentioned that there were other TBVs in development that operate under a similar premise. What differentiates Dr. Lee's vaccine, this TBV, from those TBVs? Because essentially that's your competition in this stage.
Sure. So the way that specifically Dr. Lee's TBV works is it actually targets the mosquito, as opposed to all but one of the other TBVs that are currently in development. They prevent the different types of the malaria virus from, what's the parasite, thank you, from developing far enough that it could then be passed on. So they can only actually prevent one type of the parasite, whereas there are there are two major ones that cause problems, and one's more deadly than the other, but each cause major issues for people. And so Dr. Lee's TBV actually prevents the passing of both of those parasites. Now there's one other that also accomplishes that, but we've actually spoken to the inventor of that TBV, and he has no intent to push forward in the development process right now because he doesn't think that that's the right step for them currently.